So Gavin McInnes pulls a Jussie Smollett. In fact, he pulls something even dumber than Jussie Smollett tried. Now, in case you haven't heard, Gavin McInnes is a Canadian writer and podcaster. He's on the right and has a podcast called Get Off My Lawn. He's also credited with founding the Proud Boys and other men's rights organizations. And then about a week ago, while recording his show last Thursday, he claimed someone had banged on his studio door, said, "We're shooting a show, can we do this another time?" adding that he wanted a lawyer and said, "I didn't let you in," as McInnes walked off set. The chair sat there, being filmed by the camera, for another hour. Who eventually came and turned it off? Don't know. Now, because we've seen ridiculous behavior from the FBI and, of course, his connection with the Proud Boys, a lot of people began assuming that Gavin McInnes had been arrested live on air. We know there's still American citizens being held without being charged. We know the FBI raided Mar-a-Lago in order to root through Melania Trump's underwear. And we know there's a whole lot of nonsense going on at all times. As Steve Bannon said, 35 MAGA allies got raided recently, as well as, of course, Steve himself, in a desperate last-ditch attempt to protect a deeply corrupt establishment that's finding that the walls are quickly closing in. And while many speculated that McInnes had been arrested by the FBI, for once, local and federal law enforcement told the truth and said, "We weren't involved and McInnes hasn't been charged with any crimes." It appears that this hoax was revealed when comedian Owen Benjamin texted him out of genuine concern, and McInnes texted back, "Prank, don't tell." Well, apparently Owen did tell, because McInnes texted back, "Did you spill the beans?" And then followed up with, "Looks like you did. We're done." Oh no. McInnes then came back to his show, admitted that it was a hoax, and said he had taken his family away for a getaway in France. He called it an educational vacation for his children. When he addressed the hate mail he'd been receiving, he said, well, with his regular viewers, it was split about 50-50, but about 80% of the Proud Boys said, "Screw Gavin McInnes." A viewer wrote, "Being edgy and manipulating the people who support you is so much more fulfilling than going after the people who tried to destroy your life. What is even better is everyone is now being able to use this against people on the right." Oh yeah, sarcasm warning. Gavin spent the rest of his show reading letters and mocking those that showed genuine concern for his safety. So true colors revealed, I suppose. We see him for what he is. A grifter. And I had warned about this in one of my videos called The Saga of Jack Buttplug Murphy and the Grift Shift to the Right. As the cultural right gains more and more power, the temptation to grift off of this sort of thing becomes ever more tempting. You know, I draw the comparison to Jussie Smollett. Well, what was he taking advantage of? He was taking advantage of the genuine concern people had surrounding Trump and the way that he supposedly viewed African Americans. And so when he came out and been bleached and all that, there was outrage. People were genuinely concerned, and if it had been true, it would have been a horrible story, but instead it now becomes a point of mockery for all these hate hoaxes. Well, on the right, it's not as if we don't have enough organic, genuine abuses of power that we're facing from the Biden administration. Now we have someone manufacturing them, which of course waters down, at least in the mind of the public, all these people that are actually suffering. Now, the reason I say he's even stupider than Jussie Smollett is Jussie Smollett had the backing of the media, the Hollywood, the entire television news industrial complex. Had he pulled it off, it would have been a genuine black eye to Trump-supporting fans. Like, whoa, boy. Like, there was something to be gained. It was risky, it was stupid, it was probably destined to be exposed. But we've seen numerous other hoaxes get pulled off. I mean, George Floyd is a great example where people still think he was choked to death, right? And they won't back down from that. There's a number of these hoaxes that have been successful. And when they're successful, you gain some sort of ground, at least in many people's minds. But Gavin McInnes' plan had no win. Like, what was the point? If you disappear for good and that, like, you can't fundraise off of that, eventually you have to come back and explain where you were and you were just trolling everyone. It's particularly gross because many of his allies are actually rotting away in prison right now or suffering under legitimate abuses of power. There is no win scenario for what Gavin McInnes pulled. It's just a jerk move. A temporary boost in your attention only to permanently besmirch your name? I mean, it's a lose-lose tactic. We live in an era where nobody knows where to turn anymore. The institutions we'd turned to for decades to help inform us and explain to us what's going on and guide us in our decision-making have all turned their backs on us to support some crazy globalist World Economic Forum agenda. And so these days, all we can really trust is independent commentators, media, and analysis. And the one advantage we have over those establishment institutions is our reputation, is that we do our best, at least, to tell the truth, not a narrative. Not an ends justify the means, but let the chips fall where they may. Let's just speak the truth and go from there. And when a commentator mocks his own audience, he's not just mocking that audience, but his own movement, but his own side. It's a very bizarre, like spiteful, petty, purposeless self-immolation. And we saw a very similar thing with Jack Buttplug Murphy, where he'd been exposed as a man with like an only, adult network activities. And then he said, well, I'm a traditional conservative now, and if you don't accept my apology, you're not a Christian. You're the one that's a bad person. And I think one of the mistakes that gets made is like Tim Pool never addressed this. They never addressed, to my knowledge anyway, how they got played by this grifter. And I think it is a news story worth addressing. Those people that were concerned about Gavin McInnes, yeah, you got played, and you should be angry about it. Jack Buttplug Murphy led people down this path. People were beginning to trust him, and it turned out he was just a shyster. That's fine, but these people need to be outed. We don't need more fake news. One of the fastest way the credibility of those on the left has been burned down is because they didn't gatekeep. Anyone that came and said, I was targeted by white supreme pizzas, was immediately believed, and anyone that questioned it was immediately attacked. And then when the person was exposed as a hoaxer, the public view of the trustworthiness all dropped. So on the right, it is important to gatekeep and gatekeep hard. When people step out of line, and this isn't like having an opinion that you disagree with slightly, like this is gross what he did. Gavin McInnes, and Buttplug Murphy, that was pretty gross too. Get these people out. Call them out, talk about it, address it, and stop watching them. They have no place in the cultural movement that is building and is gaining power. I mean, Joe Biden's giving speeches about MAGA Republicans because it is gaining power and they're scared. But if people are just trying to grift for personal gain or dunk on their own fans out of just some weird spite, like they have no place. And by identifying them and publicly shaming them, of course, you discourage that behavior in the future. This is one of those times where actual disavowal is useful. Gavin McInnes and those like him are at a pivotal moment acting like cancer at a time when we can least afford to have cancer. But like all things, as a resurgent right in their increase in cultural and eventually political power, they are going to attract the worst of the worst. This isn't the first time, and it certainly isn't going to be the last.